Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the living stage here at the Red Lion Hotel, the official hotel of House Lannister. Those of you who watch Game of Thrones are familiar with the fact that Lannisters always pay their debts. That means that the Lannisters also expect you to pay your debts to them. So please, for Pete's sake, be sure to pay your bills in a timely manner. I'll start by paying my debts, a debt of thanks to all the people who put this together. Jordan Piscopo, Melissa Fisher, Rachel Beasley, and Madison Florin, that I think is walking around here. I also have to give special thanks to my very good friend, the person who contacted me, Emily Jones. Emily is about as close to a real-life superhero as anyone you will ever meet. Plato talks about people having excellences, and Emily has the excellences of about 7 or 8 people, starting with the least important things moving up. What do you say to somebody who's very attractive? You often say, wow, you're so good looking, you could be a model. Well, Emily is actually a model. She's the kind of model that when models look at her, they say, it's a good thing I like pouring coffee because I can't possibly compete against her. She's a talented actor. She sings, she dances, she can do hysterical comedy, she can do powerful drama. She is a photographer who runs her own photography business. She is in charge of marketing for the Civic Theater. She is a mother of 3 wonderful girls, and most important of all, she is a die-hard Star Wars fan. And I don't mean she jumped on the bandwagon on episode 7. I mean she knows her canon. She knows her expanded universe. And she's also a wonderful person. So Emily, thank you so much for having us. It's great to be here. So it is a great honor to be here representing, we okay? Eastern Washington University and Inland Northwest Public Philosophy. When Emily asked me to do this, I thought it was a great idea, and I knew I didn't want to do it alone. I needed to have the help of my friend, my colleague, a person that I really think of as my equal partner in this life of the mind that we live. My friend, Dr. Kevin Decker. Kevin, come on up here. You know, you've often heard the old saw, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. But when I hear that, I say that's not true. Because I know a dog. An old dog. A dog so old that sometimes I look at him and I go, oh my God, why hasn't anyone put that dog down? And he is still learning tricks. And that dog is here with me today, Kevin Decker. Kevin, I think you would agree that the best part of working at Eastern is that we're a real community of friends whose relationship is based on mutual respect and communication. Wouldn't you say that?
Yeah, Terry, I honestly feel like at Eastern...
I think one of the best parts of working with Kevin is that he's really learned so much since he's been here. He knows so many things now. Watch this. Kevin is an expert on aesthetics. Kevin, please tell our audience, what is aesthetics?
Aesthetics is the philosophical theory of art and beauty.
Wow. Please, big hand, big hand. Well done, well done. Kevin, today we're going to be talking about education. Would you please tell our audience what is the classical Greek term for education as a broad civic endeavor?
Terry, the Greek term that you're looking for is paideia.
Wow. Big hand, big hand. Well done, well done, well done. Smaller cracker this time. We're going to be talking about pop culture as well today. I got it. Kevin, please tell me what seminal 1980s band wrote the hit Once in a Lifetime?
We didn't rehearse this.
You can do it, Kevin. You can do it. I have faith in you.
Terry, I think that seminal 80s band is Talking Heads.
Wow. Well done. Big hand, please.
That's true.
Can you believe he was only in school for a quarter of a century? Can you believe that? Kevin, I have in my hand 2 spoons. Would you please play them like a musical instrument?
I think I could do one.
I think you need some encouragement, folks. Who
No,
who wants to see a man with 4
do one.
degrees play 2 spoons? Come on now. Come on now. You can do it. He's going to play spoons.
I'm not even
He's playing
sure
spoons,
how.
folks.
Do you think I can do it?
Not the tip jar. Not the tip jar.
I'm tipping it.
Hey-o.
Let's try it again.
Come on, you can do it. Come on now. Come on now. Wow, well done.
Thank you.
And for those of you who are young academics in the audience, that is how you get tenure.
Yeah.
Wow. Well done. Well done. Well done.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, Kevin and I are here to talk to you about education, not as a formal, structured endeavor, but as part of an engaged, lifelong process. It might seem odd to think about education like this, but this is actually how education started. Kevin, stop it. I'm talking.
Terry, you didn't give me a cracker.
Not now, Kevin.
Terry, I want a cracker. When we rehearsed the spoon thing on Monday, I got a cracker. We rehearsed again on Tuesday. I got better, and I got a cracker, slightly larger cracker. Wednesday, there was no practice, no spoon playing, and no cracker. Thursday, we practiced 3 times. Cracker, cracker, cracker. Right? So the question is, where's my cracker?
Kevin, I can't give you a cracker every time you do the trick.
Oh, okay. I see how this is, right? Maybe I'll just go ahead and tell Emily, who left, and the sound guy, and the person who has those bright lights in our face, that they're not going to get any crackers tonight at the end of work, yeah? And maybe I just won't do this whole force of education thing with you at all. And you'll have to run this whole hotel yourself.
Kevin, you can't be serious. I mean...
Both of them. Thanks for the crackers, Jerry.
Now that you had your crackers, can we get on with our talk?
Please do.
Thank you. Thank you. That was, sorry to break the fourth wall, but that was obviously a little bit that we do. Quick aside, serious aside, that was our intellectual property, so please don't rip us off. Don't imitate it, David. Also, if lawyers from Steve Martin or Bill Murray contact you, just tell them you don't know how to get a hold of us, okay? So today's talk is called It Binds Us Together, The Force of Education. The title is, of course, a reference to the Force from Star Wars. Exactly 40 years ago, Star Wars forever transformed humanity's cultural lexicon when an old Jedi master named Obi-Wan Kenobi, played beautifully by Sir Alec Guinness, taught a lesson about the Force to an inquisitive young student named Luke Skywalker, played less beautifully by Mark Hamill. The Force is what gives a Jedi his power, he explained. It's an energy field created by all living things. It surrounds us and penetrates us. It binds the galaxy together. Like many metaphors drawn from art, the Force has inspired countless people from around the world and teachers from many different philosophies and spiritual traditions. Christians, Buddhists, Platonists, Taoists have claimed the Force as their own. In this talk, Kevin and I would like to do much the same thing. We would like to invite you to imagine the Force as a fruitful metaphor for education in its original and most vital form. Now, some of you might be getting a bad feeling about this, but don't worry. This will not be a traditional academic lecture. Emily suggested that we should think of this as a little bit like philosophical busking. So we did the bit with the spoons, and you should all feel very comfortable using our tip jar to make donations towards the Philosopher's Drinking Fund. So this is not a pitch for formal education. Instead, we want you to think of education as being like the Force. It's something that's all around us. It's essential to life. It is unfortunately easily distorted or drowned out by other impulses, and most importantly, it is a force that should bind us together. While Kevin and I are both university professors, this talk is part of our work as members of Inland Northwest Public Philosophy, which is a collaborative effort of local professors, students, and volunteers dedicated to expanding philosophy beyond the university setting. People usually think of philosophy as something you do in college, either in a philosophy class or, more likely, late at night, listening to Pink Floyd in a room that smells like a burning skunk. Now, while those two settings are totally viable places where you can do philosophy, philosophy was not meant to be reserved for just college students. Philosophy was meant to be an essential part of a lifelong practice of inquiry, dialogue, and self-education, open to anyone of any age, of any culture, who is interested in living a better life. Inland Northwest Public Philosophy strives to bring philosophy to as many people as possible because we believe that we will all be better off in a world where more people engage philosophy as part of their lives. One of the ways we do this is by giving public talks in lovely places like this, the Living Stage. We hope to organize a series of talks on topics like Star Wars and philosophy and Doctor Who and philosophy, and hopefully lots of other talks as well. This might seem like an odd setting to do philosophy, but this is actually pretty close to how philosophy started, at least in ancient Greece. People busking in public. While we are not at all on his level, this is the sort of philosophizing that Socrates did in ancient Athens. Socrates did not limit his teaching to the university setting. I mean, the guy never published anything, so he never would have gotten tenure. But still, he earned great fame, as Cicero said of him, because Socrates called philosophy down from heaven and placed it in the cities and introduced it even in homes, and drove us to inquire about life and customs and things good and evil. So it is in this original spirit of philosophy, as an ongoing practice meant for everyone, that we invite you to remember the wise words spoken a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, specifically 124 years ago in Michigan, by a young Jedi master named John Dewey, who said, "Education is not preparation for life. Education is life itself." My friend Jim Garrison, whose book Dewey and Eros I highly recommend, expands on Dewey's idea by saying the aim of education was to enable people to continue their education. Dewey considered growth the greatest good since it answers the existential question, what is the meaning of life? For Dewey, the meaning of life is to create and enrich the meaning of life. So if Dewey's Force Ghost were here, he would remind us that we should all try to be philosophers insofar as we should be educating ourselves every day. There is a wonderful scene in episode 4 that I think shows us what Dewey meant. Luke is receiving his first and sadly last lesson on lightsaber combat from the old Jedi Knight Obi-Wan Kenobi. After initial frustrations, Obi-Wan counsels Luke to reach out with his feelings. When Luke finds success and reports that he felt something, Obi-Wan commends him for taking his first step into a larger world. While we can't be real-life Jedi, as you all who know me know this, trust me, I've tried, the practice of philosophy as self-education gives us the chance to have that basic experience every day, to step every day into a larger world. Perhaps this sounds a bit hokey, as Han said of the Force, but if we commit to self-education, we see that in time it's real. It's all real. It just takes practice to see how philosophy helps us to live a good life, and that learning is inseparable from the process of living a good and worthwhile life. This is why Kevin and I spend a lot of time in class talking about philosophy's relationship to real life. We need to make this case because philosophy suffers from several bad reputations. One bad reputation about philosophy is that it is somehow weird or strange. Okay, that one is actually totally fair. In fact, the first day of Intro to Philosophy, I put up a quote from the philosopher who made me want to be a philosopher, the great Steve Martin. On philosophy's weirdness, he cautions, I'm not going to try and do the voice, if you're studying geology, which is all facts, as soon as you get out of school, you forget it all. But philosophy you remember just enough to screw you up for the rest of your life. So if we're doing our job right tonight, you should all be messed up for at least the rest of the weekend. But you should be messed up in a good way. We'll hear more on philosophy and geology from Kevin in a second. Now, one of the ways that I and my colleagues try to correct misconceptions about philosophy is by bringing it outside of the university to places like elementary schools, where many of our students are doing wonderful work, and high schools, and also really nice hotel lobbies with crazy cocoon hammocks and bars, where, again, you should all feel free to buy us drinks later. Another way we do this is by incorporating pop culture into our work, so that people see that when they're debating things about pop culture that they've been doing for years, like was it ethical to blow up the second Death Star even though it was being rebuilt by contractors or possibly slaves, they're actually engaging in philosophical debates. When we and others use pop culture to demystify philosophy, we're actually following the excellent example set by our friend and colleague Kevin Decker. I obviously really like giving Kevin a hard time, if for no other reason it keeps his already freakishly large head from getting so big that he can't fit through doorways. But the truth is that Kevin is the best of us. He was at the vanguard of the movement to use pop culture to teach philosophy in 2005 when he edited the first volume on Star Wars and philosophy. This was actually a very risky professional move when he did it. If you don't believe me, you can still see the comments on Amazon. You see people commenting on the book saying he's committing professional suicide. Of course, the people who made those comments were right, except that they never counted on the fact that any university would be irresponsible enough to put me in charge of a hiring committee. But despite this misplaced criticism, Kevin was and is still doing very ably the exact same work that Socrates did in his century, by bringing philosophy down from the professor's chair and placing it back in the street and the marketplace. It would take me too long to cite all of Kevin's many excellent contributions to this field, but they include over 20 books, journal articles, and book chapters on philosophy and pop culture titles like Star Wars, Star Trek, the works of Stanley Kubrick and Tim Burton. His truest love, however, is Doctor Who, about which he is a loving and thorough to a truly frightening degree authority. Now, if you love Doctor Who, you need to get his book, Who is Who. It is quite possibly the greatest Christmas gift of all time. Huh? Get it? Oh, you can go ahead. You can go ahead. Hi, how are you? Kevin's work reminds us that philosophy, like our favorite Time Lord, can drop into our lives odd, alien, unannounced, unbidden, and call on us to be brave enough to accompany it on adventures of self-creation. It is my great pleasure to introduce my friend, the Dr., Kevin Decker.
Doesn't he write good? Well, that's not the right word, but it's good stuff. As Terry deftly explained, we share a view on the critical importance of education and the contribution that philosophy can make to it. As we take our cue from thinkers like Plato, John Dewey, bell hooks, all of whom put education as individual growth and as socialization at the center of the philosophical enterprise. As an example of doing this, how many of you have heard of the Socratic method? Hopefully everybody. Yes, good. That's the only interactive part of the presentation tonight. I hope you enjoyed it. The Socratic method is basic to teaching that grounds itself in what students already know, right? It's asking people well-constructed questions to see what they know, then challenging their views with an effort to mutually finding the truth. Of course, philosophers also ask questions about their own lives, like, what is that beautiful house? And where does that highway go? And am I right or am I wrong? Wait a minute, that's Talking Heads again. You knew that, didn't you?
Yeah,
that's right. I got to click over.
Click to there you go.
Yeah, there we go. What do we do after all the money's gone? It was never there. But part of the method of philosophizing is that philosophers also ask questions about their own discipline. This would not be a philosophy lecture without a chart, so compare philosophy to another discipline, say geology, as two different bodies of knowledge. Now, you guys probably can't see this very well, but clearly philosophy stands out because it has itself, right, that's the difference, as one of its topics, as one of the things it asks about. What is philosophy? What is its value? Every philosopher doing work in the field is automatically adding to potential answers to that question. Geologists don't spend a lot of time debating the nature of geology or whether it's worth doing. As I've begun to like to say, there are no geologists who are skeptical about the very existence of rocks. And I confirm that. I asked a geologist. So, in the scheme of the human, philosophy represents the need for a space in culture for asking questions without reservation or without holding back. In fact, in philosophy, the questions are just as important, if not more important, than the answers sought. Some philosophers breathe life through their work into abstract questions like thinking about thought itself, woo, and questioning questions, woo. But this is not just true about philosophy, it's also true of high art and in popular culture, because we all know that sometimes the artist, the producer, the lyricist, the actor, the illustrator gets a theme, an idea, or an emotion just right as they portray it to you. They nail it, right? So one key point for me in studying the works of artists like these, if you're going to put a lot of time into studying a particular artifact of pop culture, like Terry does with Star Wars or I do with Doctor Who, then I feel like you've almost got to be a fan. And we're all fans of something, so there's plenty of material to work with. Sometimes, though, my colleagues pose this criticism of philosophy and pop culture. They say, quote, almost all pop culture is the product of mass media, and we ought to be setting higher cultural goals for our students. In short, pop culture is lowbrow. This view is the product of the 17th and 18th century age of enlightenment. And in particular, Immanuel Kant, one of its most profound thinkers, claimed, quote, our age is the genuine age of criticism, and to which everything must submit. Kant said that this new age of reason would grant, quote, unfeigned respect only to that which has been able to withstand its free and public examination. And the arena in which members of the public, a new term wrapping together the worlds of art, literature, letter, politics, and criticism, talked with each other in the public sphere. As the German philosopher Jürgen Habermas sees it, the public sphere was a new mediating entity between state and society. The role of intellectuals in determining the course of the French and American revolutions, for example, could be seen as the role of the public sphere protecting those societies from the demands of a political state that has overweening power. Meanwhile, in economic life, the development of individual fortunes in the 18th century by the new trading and financial classes, the bourgeoisie, was made possible by disconnecting the choices of individuals to use their money in ways they saw fit from the economic policies of European states. Habermas also explains how the public sphere fell. Quote, when the laws of the market governing the sphere of commodity exchange and of social labor also pervaded the sphere reserved for private people, as a public, rational, critical debate has a tendency to be replaced by consumption. So when entrepreneurs began selling culture instead of treating it as a public good with intrinsic value, they, and this is a technical term, sold out. None of us want to be sellouts, so how do we university students and teachers avoid simply being shills for Disney or Walcor? Tony, I see you out there. Walcor is always knocking at our door to try and throw money at us, or the big record corporations. The key here is to understand and be part of the special roles of the university as a distinctive institution. So it's correct, as Habermas says, that universities must transmit technically exploitable knowledge, and this is nowhere more true than a regional comprehensive university like Eastern. Most of the students who come to Eastern are in it for a set of skills and then to get a job. To quote Bruce Henderson of another regional, Western Carolina University, quote, throughout their histories, the regional comprehensives have had a special responsibility for providing teaching, research, and public service with a vocational orientation. Many degree programs of the regionals are designed to prepare students for jobs immediately after graduation in fields ranging from teaching to nursing to construction management. I came from a blue-collar family, so I like to mention that because I think that's also important, in addition to the intrinsic value that we find in studying things like philosophy. However, returning to Habermas, the university has three other functions. It must also ensure its graduates are equipped with at least minimal qualifications in soft skills, including good judgment, critical thinking, communication, ability to work in groups and with cultural competence, and various other unwritten professional standards. Secondly, they also have to transmit, interpret, and develop the cultural tradition of society, and they must form the political consciousness of their students. Toleration of other points of view, the need for rigorous standards of evidence, and intellectual curiosity that spans a lifetime are politically important virtues for citizens, and they are not the sorts of traits that people are just born with. This is the difference between a business and a university. In a democracy, the university cannot be value neutral. If we do not produce students who treat democratic values, like Dewey said, as a way of life, rather than as merely one consumer choice among many others, then we invite rule by demagogues or corporations or both. So to be slick in the manner of a marketing executive, notice that pivot, I propose this equation. Private entertainment plus public philosophy equals edutainment. Just imagine the sparkly sound in your mind as I say that. The consumption of mass-produced entertainment is only contrary to what we should be doing in the college classroom when it is processed or taught passively and uncritically. Plenty of pop culture, of course, is shallow and trite. So we should avoid seeing these as examples of pop culture that have something to teach us. There are plenty of things that don't. To the contrary, we need to take an attitude like Ryan Gosling's character Sebastian in La La Land. I love La La Land. Who takes jazz-hating Mia, played by Emma Stone, to the Lighthouse Club. He tells her, "You can't just hear jazz, you have to see it happen." The most compelling thing about the music of jazz is how dynamic and improvisational it is, he says. Traits that, especially for a newcomer like Stone, are best expressed in a live setting. Well, how about that? Segue, and I didn't even know it. And helping students learn is a lot like helping someone appreciate jazz or other higher pleasures. We can't expect students to agilely overcome their passive consumer training when presented with popular culture in the classroom. We instead need to motivate a critical attitude that leads them to a deeper appreciation for the deeper meaning behind what we're studying. Our students are key players in creating computers, interpreting Russian novels, teaching the next generation, and they're also key players in transforming mere entertainment into edutainment. I promise this is the most complicated graphic I will present tonight. And Terry. I don't think Terry has another more complicated one. Through their role as connection makers and as critics in and outside the classroom, students become an active audience and learn the importance of selection and choice for more deep and fulfilling viewing, reading, and listening opportunities. Sellouts are on the left, and critical media consumers are on the right. So only edutainment is on the right. The elevator is on top. And so now I want to turn things back to the scholar and gentleman who asks these kind of questions that we've been talking about so well and takes advantage of every teachable moment, as his having as evidenced by his having recently won our college's top teaching award. That's cool. My best friend and the man who Qui-Gon Jinn from Star Wars takes his fashion tips from, Professor of Philosophy and Honors, something in the family, running in the family, Dr. Terrance MacMullan. Terry is the very model of a public intellectual. He gives addresses to the campus and local community frequently. He gives readings at Auntie's bookstore on philosophy and pop culture. He has twice won the Inter-American Philosophy Award from the Society for the Advancement of American Philosophy for his original work, including rendering into English previously untranslated works in Spanish on Latin American philosophers. Ladies and gentlemen, the hardest working man in philosophy, Terry MacMullan.
Thank you very much, Kevin. Kevin is a very hard act to follow, so pity me. Kevin mentioned how you need to truly love these cultural artifacts in order to really learn from them. You need to have a love that spills over, as he beautifully said. So I want to end by having my love of Star Wars spill over into my love of philosophy and leave you with some insights about education, philosophy, and life. Now, while we might not have blasters or hyperdrives or lightsabers yet, I think that we can still learn a great deal from Star Wars that we can apply to real life if we engage it critically, like Kevin said. In the Star Wars universe, as in ours, we see at least three philosophies of life, very different philosophies of life. of which we need to be aware that we might wisely navigate between them. The first philosophy of life, the one that I try to follow, is analogous to the Jedi philosophy that calls us to follow the light side of the Force. It is a philosophy of life that is rooted in the same lifelong process of self-education that Dewey described, and I think it echoes many of the philosophies that we see around the world, like Stoicism and Taoism. It calls us to develop a balance between our thinking head and our feeling heart. It calls us to anticipate likely future events, but not at the expense of mindfulness about the present. It encourages us to bind together our individual disparate experiences into an integrated and unique person, capable of thriving within any environment. It teaches us to try to bind together unique individuals to form a society in which each is free to develop their individuality in a way that cares for and supports others. Finally, it helps us bind together the individual strands of our knowledge about the universe into a cohesive whole, which becomes stronger over time even as it calls forth new reasons to wonder and inquire. However, just as the Jedi philosophy was nearly snuffed out in the Star Wars stories, this philosophy of life is always in danger of being eclipsed by another philosophy that sees life as serving a very different purpose. The Emerson scholar John Lysaker, in his essay Life Takes Visa, relates this problem to formal education when he talks about the fact that very few students come to college with growth in mind. He writes, if you've ever advised undergraduates in a major that lacks a scripted vocational future, you're familiar with the question, what can I do with that? Lysaker goes on to describe how he unconsciously slips into a routine about philosophy teaching transferable skills that are well suited to a rapidly changing workplace and its high ROI, or return on investment. He makes these explanations in good faith, as our students and their parents are right to be concerned about their fiscal futures. But he then adds that on that rare occasion that he says students should study philosophy because it leads to a deeper, richer life, the reply he gets is, no, really. The problem here is not that we are all worried about, the problem is not that we are worried about money, but that these legitimate concerns born of living in age where we have to fend ever more for ourselves skews our view of life's purpose and narrows our discussions about education's value down to the single value of dollars and cents. This prompts Lysaker to ask, if capital accumulation more or less exhaustively defines teleological background of higher education, who needs zombie movies? We see the same struggle over the meaning of life in Star Wars, where good people trying to do well by others are thwarted by the fact that most people, often unwillingly, usually unwittingly, believe that the only real value is the value of credits. Sometimes those thwarting the hero are out-and-out greedy villains like the merchant Watto, who enslaves young Anakin Skywalker and his mother Shmi and only frees Anakin after he risks his life winning a dangerous pod race. However, Star Wars does not impart the simplistic idea that the concern for money is somehow inherently evil. We often see very wise and good people demonstrating a canny knowledge of financial realities, as when Obi-Wan makes a shrewd business deal with the cunning smuggler Han Solo in order to get off Tatooine, just as all of us have had to learn how to sell the value of our skills and abilities in economic terms. I think Star Wars teaches that we need to accept, when appropriate, the financial realities of our world, while at the same time resisting the impulse to treat our lives and our efforts as just means to financial ends. I think Han Solo's growth over 4 films is a good model for us on this point. When we first meet him, he is a self-concerned scoundrel who cares only about money. However, over time, he grows and realizes that his connection to his friends and their struggle for justice is more important even than the money he needs to pay off the bounty on his head. So, while I think we need to balance these first 2 philosophies, there's a third philosophy of life in Star Wars that poses very real dangers in our own world. Beware the dark side, Yoda tells Luke. Anger, fear, aggression, the dark side of the Force are they. Every major character in Star Wars wages an inner battle between the 2 sides of the Force, the light which grants peace through feeling and connection, and the dark side which yields power and efficiency through fear and separation. With this message, Star Wars recalls central teachings common to Stoicism, Buddhism, and Christianity by reminding us that while we are all capable of being in touch with the Force, none of us are ever completely free of the anger, fear, and hatred just as the hero Luke Skywalker must accept that he is far more like his father Darth Vader than he might want to admit. This very real philosophy of life distorts the force of our lives through fear and anger. Instead of being aware of and in control of your feelings, it promises power through unleashing your passions. If you're my age or older, you likely remember that the rules in school, at work, and yes, in the home were very different from what they are now. You might there remember teachers or bosses who commanded obedience through fear. I went to Catholic school for my entire childhood, and most of my teachers were very kind and very hardworking good men and women. But I do remember that rare but terrifying nun who would command strict discipline and efficient rote memorization through dire fear of physical punishment and public humiliation. While I hope you don't have a boss or teacher who paces the classroom or office decked out in Darth Vader black, ready to inflict physical harm on you with a lightsaber-sized ruler, I also know that whomever you are, you know the temptation of the dark side of the Force, either submitting to it or using it. The dark side tempts us to use fear, hatred, or anger to gain quick control either over others or ourselves. It tempts us to submit to the fear of other people's power because it is easier and safer than being brave. It calls us to achieve power by denying the interconnections within ourselves and between ourselves and others. As Yoda says of the dark side, it is not necessarily stronger than the light side, but it is quicker, easier. We all have elements of our lives that involve power, ranging from work to intimate relationships. It takes great mindfulness to resist the impulse to get what we want by controlling others through fear. It takes great mindfulness not to give in to fear of another's power. Of course, a life driven by fear is not, in the long run, a good life. Fear, whether we're using it or reacting to it, is corrosive of life's value, rendering it external and alienating. This life becomes like Obi-Wan's description of Darth Vader, twisted and evil, more machine than man. So, saying this as much for myself as for you, remember that the real value of life is inseparable from our need to grow in order to be happy and whole. We need to learn to articulate the economic value of our skills and efforts while remembering that this value is secondary to life's deeper purpose, to learn and grow. Beware the dark side of the Force, either using it or submitting it. Finally, remember that as long as we live, there is hope for fulfillment and redemption. On his last day, even Darth Vader learned. He remembered the true nature of the Force and redeemed himself by renewing his connection with his son Luke. And now, Kevin will give us some concluding thoughts.
Well, I think that actually deserves applause first. Okay, it's very key that everybody be able to see this for the review as good teachers who do our assessments. Not. We must show that we have actually taught you something in the course of the lesson. So first of all, what we learned today, first of all, obviously, learning can happen anywhere, especially when Mark Hamill is involved. Education is not preparation for life, it is life itself. Of course, philosophy will screw you up for the rest of your life. You need to keep that in mind. That's the danger there. It was ethical to blow up the Death Star, but deeply wrong to feature Jar Jar Binks at all.
You bite his tongue. Look at that. The candy
the tongue
is his
a popsicle. This is the grossest toy that was ever created. Beyond Jar Jar, everybody's a fan of something. I like to emphasize that. You just can't hear jazz. You have to see it happen. Education driven by fear, as Terry just said, is not education. The force of education binds us together, and we wish you a happy Life Day. Thank you very much.